When one hospital closes, a community trembles. When 1,300 close in a single year, an entire nation begins to question its heartbeat. Tonight, we are not discussing numbers. We are confronting a truth that when systems collapse, it is people who bleed first. And yet, within this crisis lies something rare, an opportunity to decide what kind of world we want to heal. When a nation's healthcare system begins to tremble, the shock waves do not end at the hospital gates. They travel outward, through families, through communities, through the conscience of society itself. What we are witnessing in China today, with more than 1,300 hospitals closed in a single year, is not merely an administrative reform or a shift in policy. It is an event that touches the very structure of human welfare. These hospitals were not just buildings. They were instruments of care, of trust, of human continuity. Their closure signals more than economic strain. It signals a deep systemic imbalance between need and capacity, between purpose and execution, between people and the systems meant to serve them. When a hospital closes, it is not simply a door that locks. It is the silencing of a heartbeat in the body of society. The physician who once stood ready must now turn elsewhere. The nurse who served a village must now search for new ground. The patient who once knew where to go must now face uncertainty. This is the human cost of collapse, an invisible toll that statistics often fail to measure. We must have the courage to look beyond the numbers and ask what forces have led to this unraveling. Is it financial exhaustion, a demographic strain of aging populations, a misalignment of priorities between urban growth and rural neglect? These questions are not accusations. They are instruments of understanding. In science, we are trained not to assign blame, but to seek causes. When a culture of care begins to falter, we do not stand back in despair. We move forward in inquiry. We observe, we compare, we learn, because each failure holds within it the seed of reform. The closure of hospitals in such magnitude is not only a tragedy, it is also a signal that the structure of healthcare, once thought immovable, is now asking for renewal. Systems, like organisms, must evolve. They must adapt or risk decay. Yet amid the disruption lies an opportunity, a chance to rebuild more intelligently, with foresight and integrity. In times of collapse, we rediscover the essence of what medicine means. It is not merely the management of institutions or the control of costs. It is the moral act of serving life. When old systems fall, new ones must arise, rooted in compassion, transparency, and a respect for human dignity. The challenge before China and before all of us observing is not only to stabilize, but to transform. We must remember that health is not an industry. It is a covenant between people and their societies, between science and humanity, between what is possible and what is necessary. The collapse of 1,300 hospitals reminds us that no system, however vast, can endure without that moral foundation. And so, in this moment of reckoning, let us not see ruin, but rebirth. Not the end of care, but the call to care more wisely, more equitably, and with deeper purpose. There are moments in history when crisis and opportunity appear together, almost indistinguishable. What may seem like the unraveling of a system is, in truth, an invitation to renewal. The widespread closures of hospitals in China, over 1,300 within a single year, mark such a moment. The instinct of many is to see this as failure, as decay, as proof that the structure of care is weakening. Yet, if we look more deeply, with the eyes of science and the heart of humanity, we see that within the breakdown lies a profound opportunity to understand, to adapt, and to build anew. In medicine, when a patient's body reacts in distress, we do not simply mourn the symptoms, we study them. The same is true of societies. When institutions falter, when systems collapse, we must examine them as we would a living organism, tracing causes, observing interactions, identifying where the lifeblood no longer flows. The closures may be a symptom of economic strain, policy reform, or demographic pressure. But beneath those surface explanations lies something greater, a challenge to the very principles that guide how care is given, shared, and sustained. This is not the time for despair or accusation. It is a time for inquiry and reinvention. When I think of science, I think not only of discovery, but of responsibility. The responsibility to use knowledge, to improve life, to alleviate suffering, to prevent harm. The collapse of hospitals is not just a political or logistical matter. It is a test of whether we can respond to adversity with intelligence and compassion. Can we find within the ruins a model that works better for the next generation? Can we design a system that anticipates crisis instead of merely reacting to it? Opportunity often hides in the debris of what once was. Just as the immune system rebuilds itself after illness, a nation can strengthen its health care by acknowledging its weaknesses. In the quiet spaces where hospitals once stood, there is a chance to imagine facilities more connected to community needs, more efficient in technology, more humane in purpose. This is not about rebuilding what was lost. It is about redefining what healthcare can become. History reminds us that progress does not arise from comfort, but from challenge. The collapse of these hospitals may appear as regression, but it also exposes what must change. It compels the scientific mind and the moral spirit to act in concert. We cannot rely solely on policy or profit to shape systems of care. We must be guided by conscience, by a shared understanding that health is a collective responsibility. So in this time of upheaval, let us not retreat into fear. Let us see, instead, the rare opportunity before us to rethink, redesign, and restore. The collapse of China's hospitals, though grave, is not the end of healing. It is a moment that calls us to begin again, with clearer purpose, deeper compassion, and the unshakable conviction that out of disruption can emerge a stronger, more humane system for all. Even in times of collapse, I have always believed that hope is not extinguished. It is clarified. It becomes sharper, more essential, more honest. When we see a healthcare system falter, as China's has with the closure of more than 300 hospitals, we are reminded that progress is not guaranteed. It must be earned, protected, and renewed by each generation. But it is in such moments of loss that the true measure of human responsibility reveals itself. For if we cannot find purpose in difficulty, then we have learned nothing from the history of medicine, nor from the quiet resilience of those who dedicate their lives to healing. Hope, in its truest form, is not naive optimism. It is the discipline of believing that our actions still matter. When institutions crumble, when structures prove fragile, we can respond in two ways. We can yield to cynicism, or we can rise with conviction. The closure of hospitals is, of course, a tragedy for the individuals and communities who have lost their centers of care. But it is also a mirror held up to humanity, reflecting the urgent need for integrity, innovation, and empathy in how we design the systems meant to safeguard life. I have long said that the greatest gift of science is not its discoveries, but the responsibility it awakens within us. To be aware is to be accountable. And so, awareness of this collapse must not end with observation. It must lead to action. We must ask ourselves, how do we ensure that healthcare serves people before profit, compassion before convenience, and prevention before crisis? These are not philosophical questions alone. They are the architecture upon which the future of medicine depends. Even as hospitals close, the work of healing does not cease. Doctors will still tend to the sick. Nurses will still offer comfort. Communities will still find ways to care for one another. That is the nature of humanity, to rebuild, to reorganize, to rediscover its moral compass when systems fail. The measure of our civilization will not be found in the number of hospitals we have, but in the constancy of our compassion when they are gone. If the lesson of this crisis is to teach us humility, then it is a valuable lesson indeed. No nation, no institution is immune to the consequences of neglect. The strength of a healthcare system is not in its walls, but in its wisdom. When that wisdom fades, collapse follows. But when it is restored, progress returns, and often it returns stronger, more resilient, more aligned with the human spirit. So let us not mistake this collapse for defeat. Let it awaken us a renewed sense of duty, a call to rebuild with purpose, to innovate with conscience, to care without boundaries, for the future of health and of humanity itself depends not on what has been lost, but on what we choose to create from the lessons left behind. So yes, 1,000 hospitals have fallen, but what must rise now is greater than any building. It is our conscience. The future of healthcare will not be written by governments alone, but by all who refuse to accept that collapse is inevitable. Because every failure of a system is a reminder that humanity itself has not failed yet. And as long as we choose to care, there is still time to heal.